Good evening, kings and queens. This is Seth Moore coming to you once more here from Anchor by Spotify. You can also find us on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple Music, and many, many other host sites. We're here this evening because we want to talk about some things, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard the term used before, but whether or not you know the actual contents that are in this this program, I'm going to give you some information, and you can kind of hash it out, as you see fit, in regards to what you think about it. I know a lot of you are preparing to go to church tomorrow and worship the Lord and all this kind of stuff. But we're going to be talking about faith-based initiatives. I know a lot of you have heard that term used. It was, of course, under George Bush. He started the actual faith-based initiative program, and it kind of trickled down to Obama when Obama got into office. And so we want to give you some information as to what this is. And we want you to put on your thinking caps, and we want you to think critically as to what are the benefits of this and what are the downsides of this, and what was it initially supposed to do. Okay? And so I'm going to start reading some things to you, and you get a general idea of where this is going. Okay? Yeah, you can get a general idea as to where this is going. Okay? So it says here that in Washington, November 18th, I believe this actually started in 2010, I believe this is. Yes, it's 2010, November 18th, 2010. The doc is 151. When President George W. Bush authorized federally funded partnerships between the government and faith-based groups nearly a decade ago, he opened a new chapter in the debate over separation of church and state. And of course, a lot of you know what that is, separate of church and state. And for you that don't, I'm just going to give you a bit of that in a moment. It's amazing how when you begin to, do something relevant and critical information, how your computer starts to act crazy. Okay. So anyways, and then sometimes it doesn't want to give you the information that you need. But however, we're going to move on. Bush's so-called faith-based initiative green-lighted. I want you to hear me now. Bush's so-called faith-based initiative green-lighted taxpayer dollars to local churches and other religious organizations to help them expand their social services in local communities. It's an arrangement President Obama supports as well. Now, I hope you heard what I just said. Now, this faith-based initiative program, as you just heard me read, it was supposed to support local communities. Let me read that again, because I don't think some of y'all heard me. It says the faith-based initiative green-lighted taxpayer dollars, your dollars, my dollars, taxpayer dollars to local churches and other religious organizations to help them expand their social services in local communities. It's an arrangement President Obama supports as well. Now I'm gonna come back to this, but I want to read you what Bush did. Bush promotes faith-based poverty initiatives. May 20, 2001, President Bush today called on religious groups to join the government in America's war on poverty. Now, let me just foremention before I go any further that these programs were not they were not designed perfectly, but they were to help the communities, and there was a lot of pushback on it from a lot of religious leaders, and we'll find that out as I go along. Our society must enlist, equip, and empower idealistic Americans in works of compassion that only they can provide, he told Notre Dame graduates during his commencement address. Bush urged a $50 million increase in federal funds for home building programs like Habitat for Humanity, and he said religious groups should be allowed to compete for federal drug. They should be allowed to compete for federal drug. Is that federal drug? Yes, it is. Compete for federal drug treatment money. Okay. So a lot of you probably seen, on TV before, Jimmy Carter with a lot of people who were building these homes, and that's Habitat for Humanity. They're building homes for the poor and so forth and so on. Okay? The president promised that the government could keep church and state separate, but critics remain wary. Many Christians, conservatives, are concerned that the government will start to have some say in religious matters or begin to regulate religion through the faith-based initiative, said Robert Boston of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Okay, praise for Johnson Clinton. Okay. There were some surprises from Mr. Bush today. He praised two of his Democratic predecessors, President Johnson for embarking on the Walton poverty 37 years ago, and President Clinton's for signing the 1996 welfare reform law. The graduates also heard President Bush offer a criticism. It says rare criticism of the business community, which falter for not donating money to the religious groups. Okay, the federal government will not discriminate against faith-based organizations, and neither should corporate America, he told the graduates. The president's choice of one American's largest Catholic university to push its faith-based programs are no accident. Okay, so anyways, now, a lot of these religious groups, they have a lot to say about, the government interfering in their religious practices. Why? Because number one, as you probably already aware of, churches come under 501c3, which means that they're tax exempt, which also means, which I just stated, they don't have to pay taxes to the government. Okay, meaning that they have pretty much free reign as to any control over monetary funding that they actually take in. And mind you, that they also receive monies from the government, right? They also receive monies from the government. And these monies sometimes are often not accounted for, okay, because they do, although you might be a nonprofit, you still have to turn in, as far as my understanding, you still have to give an account for monies that you're actually spending to a certain degree, okay? But the problem is that a lot of these religious organizations are not giving account. They're not giving account for what's going on in their edifices. Okay, but I also want to mention this to you too, that these religious organizations and churches, particularly if they happen to be a mega church, I mean, all the churches, whether they're small or whether they're, big or not, but particularly, the mega churches, because of course they take in more revenue, they have more parishioners, they have more bodies that are in there. And also what you got to remember, y'all, a lot of you guys are probably not aware of this. Don't you know that anytime you sign your name to anything in the church, that's counting heads? Because I used to work for a nonprofit, Healthcare Solutions here, in the Virginia area for many, many years. Anytime you have people come in, and we used to service community for, the mentally ill, homeless, those who are in dual recovery, so forth, so on. Anytime they sign any kind of document for any type of service or whatever it is, any municipality who they have to report to, they count heads. Those heads are dollars. Okay? Those heads count as dollars. So you may not be aware of that, but they do. They count as dollars. I know, because I worked for one. We used to do the minutes, sitting meetings, and they used to, go over, the allotments of money that they were getting every quarter, so forth, so on. Okay. So remember, those heads count as dollars. So now you have some churches who are now requiring people to turn in their tax returns, or they need to know what your W-2 is before you could become a member. Okay, so think about that. They're requiring you to submit your W-2 before you could become a member of that church. I'm sure some of y'all have heard of this. Some of these big churches, they want to know how much money you're making every year. I would not be a part of an organization like that. That's too much information. That's just too much information on my private life. So if you have separation of church and state, why can't you have separation of your personal private business from the church? And not only that, think about this. Why do you think that anytime during election time, any politician that wants to come in your church is never denied? Why do you think that is? Why do you think your preacher will never deny a politician from coming in your church during election time? Obviously, because the church is getting money from the government. But at the same time, if you fall on hard times, and your church literally has an obligation to hire you, because they're receiving not only your tax dollars, but they're already also receiving government money. They're receiving government money. So they have an obligation to hire you because they're a business. See, this is the thing too. And this is the game that they play on a lot of people. They want to be spiritual when it comes to business. When it comes to business, when it comes to you, when it comes to them doing the right thing, they want to get spiritual on you because they have an obligation to function just as any corporate entity. Because why? They're receiving your tax dollars. I just read that to you. And they're receiving government money. So you can bet when COVID was at its height and COVID hit, do you think for 1 minute that those churches was not returning in papers for what do you call it, PPP loans or whatever it is, for the stimulus package and so forth, so on. They were receiving money from the government, but at the same time, they will turn you away from giving you a job because they're playing favorites in the churches. But they won't give you a job when you need a job. But you paying your tithes and offerings every Sunday and in every Bible study and every whatever conference or whatever you have. And they have an obligation, especially if they call themselves a man or woman of the cloth. They have an obligation to see that you and your family are not destitute. An obligation, first of all, to the Creator. And then also by the government because they're receiving government funding and also they're receiving your tax dollars. But I digress. We'll move on. Let me go back. So we'll continue to, let me go back and I'm going to read some more to you. So it's a shame. You can't allow these people, and I don't want to be disparaging to anyone. I really don't. But I want you to be aware. I want you to know what's going on. And this is why I say all the time that we bring world news that matters. I'm going to bring you content that matters to keep you thinking. So these people won't play these games with you. Okay, and it also says here, now President Obama picked it up by amid persistent criticism that the initiative walks a fine constitutional line, the administration moved to strengthen the constitutional and legal footing of the policy Wednesday with an executive order to add safeguards against inappropriate entanglement between church and state. Now, religious organizations that receive federal grants, listen, federal grants are already prohibited from using the money directly for religious activities and cannot discriminate on the basis of religion when providing their services. Now, it says here, I just read to you, religious organizations that receive federal grants are already prohibited from using the money, the money directly for religious activities and cannot discriminate on the basis of religion when providing their services. So what that means is, okay, and I don't espouse to, the other way of living in regards to, people, they make their choices, so forth, so on, as far as the LGBT community. But for instance, an example, if someone was to come and say, okay, I need a job, and you have all the wherewithal to be able to provide them employment. You can't discriminate on that person based on their sexual orientation, religion, race, what have you. You understand what I mean? So you couldn't do that. Okay, and so think about it this way as well. Because already they're receiving money from parishioners besides the government and tax dollars. So why wouldn't they take the money that they receive from the government to uplift the community? Because I just read to you earlier what it meant for faith-based to be called a faith base. What did they say? Bush called the faith-based initiative green-lighted taxpayer dollars to local churches and other religious organizations to help them expand what? Their social services in local communities. And its arrangement, okay, and President Obama picked it up, okay, and of course, when I just read, but amid persistent criticism, okay, And it talks about here the fine constitutional line that they have to walk in regards to administrative rules, so forth and so on, and constitutional legal footing, and adding safeguards to inappropriate entanglement between church and state. Religious organizations that receive federal grants are already prohibited from using the money directly for religious activities, as I just read, and cannot discriminate on the basis of religion when providing their services. Now, however, individuals seeking aid through federal programs who might be put off by religious natures of in an organization will receive greater deference. Agencies must identify alternative service providers to those who object. Okay? So let's see what Obama said. And we're gonna and if I run out of time here, we're gonna just come back. We'll do a backup. Okay, that's how we'll do that. Okay, that's how we'll do that. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, it says here, January 29. Now, this was 2010. If church attendance is one measure of a man's faith, then President Obama may appear to have lost some of his. The first family, once regular churchgoers, have publicly attended services in Washington on just 3 times in the past year. Okay, well, count even bypassing the pews or Christmas Day. Okay, he's a president, so you don't expect him to be in church every day. So Obama quit Chicago's embattled Trinity Unity Church of Christ months before taking office in 2008. And of course, many of us know how that went, where he was pressured to denounce Reverend Wright because of Reverend Wright's rhetoric in terms of how he saw the U.S. and so forth and so on, and has not formally joined a new one in his new hometown. Okay, and you probably know why that is as well. But sources familiar with the president's personal life say Obama remains a faithful Christian while in the White House, practicing his beliefs regularly in private with family and the aid of his BlackBerry. And of course, that can be argued, but who's the judge? President Obama is a Christian. He's always been clear and unapologetic about that, and he's comfortable with his own faith. Okay, but let's go back to the part where we'll get back to the part where we talk about okay, let's do this. We're going to go back to where we were. And so I want you to keep in mind, too, that there's an obligation on the church to support its parishioners and those that serve in the church, because the church, being that it comes under that title and it comes under a 501c3, okay, it is considered not an LLC, not for profit, but it is profiting. You understand what I'm saying? Now, there's a difference, because you can actually use the 501c as a guise, if you know what I mean. You follow what I'm saying? You can use it as a guise of profitability, because the reason why they don't put the church under a LLC for profit, number one, it's too obvious. Okay. The second reason would be that it may not get as much support. Okay, being an LLC. Okay, so coming under the 501c3, it looks like the church is being charitable. They're not in it for money. But we all know better, right? We all know better. We're smarter than that. So you couldn't tell, a one-eyed man with a peg leg that, So we know that the church is there for profit. But in the same turn, is the church making your communities better where you live? Because they have an obligation, because they're receiving your tax dollars and they're receiving money from the government under a mandate where they are promising to be a staple in the community, not just sitting there as a building and not just sitting there as a entity collecting money, and maybe every summer they might give a cookout, or they might give out some turkeys on Thanksgiving, which is not bad. But at the same time, how are they changing the environment in which you live? Because they have an obligation. How many people are they hiring from the community? How many people are they actually employing in the community? And not being discriminatory just by hiring family or hiring people that they feel like they can. Now think about this. A lot of times people are hired because when I worked for the nonprofit, which I did, one of the guys used to work with me. He was a facilitator. And I can remember when this guy got a higher position, because he got with some people where he put himself in a position by marrying. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But what I'm trying to say is that oftentimes what people will do is they'll try to employ people that they can control, employ people that will keep their secrets and won't spill the beans on them to let others know what they're actually doing. You understand what I'm saying? But they have an obligation, and this is why a lot of times people will not hire people who have a strong backbone, because they don't want you to know what they're doing. They don't want you to know that they're embezzling money. They don't want you to know that they're not being ethical. They're not being fair, but all the time they're telling you God this and God that. But they're not being fair. They're not hiring within the community. And they have an obligation to do that, as I just read to you. Okay. So a lot of these people, what we got, you have faith-based bandits. That's what you have, because they're collecting money off of your tax dollars. Not only that, they're getting tax money from your tithes and offerings. They're getting money from the government, and you guys are not calling them on the carpet as to, how much money did you guys get from the government on our behalf? Because I said, when you sign your name to something, they're turning that in. And your name is on it. All them tied envelopes that you put your name on. You understand what I'm saying? All them tied envelopes and offering envelopes that you're putting your name on, they copy those things and they send them into the government. And you're ahead counted as $1. And so when the government sees how many people that they're servicing, that's how they get funding. Okay, so, but amid persistent criticism that the initiative walks a fine constitutional line, the administration moved to strengthen the constitutional and legal footing of the policy Wednesday with an executive order, to safeguarding against inappropriate entanglement between church and state. Okay, so President Obama signs executive order to implement reform recommendations of the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Okay, so let's enlarge just a bit so I can see. Okay, so here we are. Today, President Obama signed an executive order that makes significant improvements in federally funded partnerships between government and faith-based and neighborhood organizations. These changes were recommended by a task force of the President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, a group of church-state experts from across the ideological spectrum and unanimously approved by the full advisory council. These leaders identify specific ways the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships should strengthen the constitutional and legal footing of social service partnerships involving religious and neighborhood organizations and provide greater support and clarity to these important organizations. Now, you just heard me read. Now, think about this. You just heard me read. You just heard me read. You just heard me read. And think about this, y'all. You just heard me read. They are getting money from the government, and they're making, not so much making deals. And I'm going to say this, and this is going to sound really critical. But for those of you who are conscious, it is by design that they're giving these churches money because they want to keep you, they want to keep a hold on you. And so you can sort that out and do research and study that and pray and find out how that's actually happening. But that's really the bottom line. But at the same time, while you're in there, you should be holding their feet to the fire. I'm not in there, so I don't have to do that. That's why I'm telling you, because I don't do church. And I don't say that because I think I'm better than you or anything like that. I just know the game. Okay? So they're receiving monies from the government, from your tithes and offerings, from your Bible study money, from your conference money, from your this money, from your that money, your trip money. But how much of that again, like I said earlier, is going into the community? How many people in the community are being hired by these mega churches? Why are there still shootings in our communities? Why are we still killing one another? Why isn't the church active in bringing in and resolving conflict in our communities regarding, this unrest with unemployment? Why hasn't the church gone out and employed some of these gangbangers, changing the lives? And I'm not saying none of them are not doing that, but overall, there's a plethora of black young men on the street, and women too, homeless, so forth and so on. And these was one of the things that we did with the organization I work with. We fed the hungry. We gave them clothes. We gave them referral services. Okay? That's what we did. If they were mentally ill, we made sure that they got in rehab. We made sure they got in dual recovery, whatever their situation were. Okay, so this, and it's, as I just read here, the constitutional and legal footing of social services partnerships involving religious and neighborhood organizations and provide greater support and clarity to these important organizations. The full council, okay, they reported on these issues. These are important substantive changes that are directly responsive to the recommendations of the church experts across the ideological spectrum, as I just read, said Joshua DuBose, Executive Director of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. With this executive order, we will be strengthening and clarifying the legal footing of the government relationships with faith-based organizations and underscoring the important role of these organizations in serving individuals, families, and communities in need. And so you have to ask yourself that. You have to ask yourself then, did these churches, and I'm sure you already know, did these churches receive monies from the government during COVID? Did they receive dollars from the government during COVID? Of course they did. Did these dollars go back into the community? Now, now think about this. I'm going to say this. During COVID, you had a lot of people. It's a shame. You had a lot of churches receiving money from, and I'm sure a lot of you've heard of this, from the government that really didn't need it. Joel Osteen returned over $4 million or even more dollars back to the government. I guess the government said you didn't need the money, or either his conscience got to him. He sent the money back. You even had pastors like Kenneth Copeland and others during COVID telling people to send their money in through Cash App and all this kind of stuff, and God gonna do this and that. They took advantage of people so terribly bad. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was literally ridiculous. And I'm sure some of you guys are aware of this. You've had pastors who were having church. They were so desperate. It had nothing to do with the Lord or anything. They was having church in parking lots to get your money. Okay, we're going to stop right there for a moment, and we're going to come right back, and we're going to continue for another brief segment, and then we'll gear up for the next podcast. Okay, stay with us. Okay, and we're back. We're back, kings and queens, and we're going to dive right back in, and we'll try to. I'm going to say finish up, but we're going to probably be coming back with some more. Maybe not tonight, but we're going to be, when we follow back up with this. I won't say series, but when we follow back up with this discussion, we're going to be covering some more on this topic. Okay. So let's and I want you to see. I really do. I want you to see this because this is so. How do people? They want to hold you and make you accountable. What about them? The person who's doing the preaching to you always want to hold you accountable. And then they'll tell you, they're accountable to God. But you can't tell them nothing. You can't. See, and this is the thing. It is no way I will be giving my money to no man or woman. And then you telling me that I don't have a say. I don't have a say about what goes on. You will never get a damn dime from me. There's no way you're going to play me like that. But you're going to take my hard-earned money, and then you tell me I don't have a say what happens with that money. See, y'all, we need to wake up, y'all, really. We need to come out of Babylon. We really do. So listen to this. And as I just read how important they talked about these changes were in regards to the partnerships in the neighborhoods and the executive orders, and strengthening and clarifying, the legal footing of the government's relationship with the faith-based organizations, and underscoring the importance of the role that it plays in serving individuals, families, and communities that are in need. Specifically, it says it requires the government to protect the beneficiaries of federally funded social services programs, providing referrals to alternative providers if the beneficiary objects to the religious character of the organization providing the service. Clarifies that decisions about financial awards must be free from political interference or even the appearance of such interference. Affirms that the faith-based organizations that receive federal financial assistance may use their facilities to provide social services without removing or altering religious art, icons, scriptures, or other symbols from these facilities. So, okay, the organizations or churches or what have you, they have this in their favor that by receiving these monies, the government can't tell them, okay, you got to come in or you got to take that down, or you can't have this program. They can't tell them that. But there is an obligation, as I just read before, of servicing individuals and not discriminating against them by orientation or religious beliefs, or I'm not going to hire you because you're a Presbyterian, or which church do you go to, or where do you work. So they can't discriminate against you upon those factors. Okay, and it says they have the ability to select board members on a religious basis and include religious references in its organization's mission statements and other chartering or governing documents. Requires the federal government to monitor and enforce standards, listen to this, regarding the relationship between religion and government in ways that avoid excessive entanglement. Okay, so this is the government making sure that these organizations are running correctly without the interference of different organizational bodies. Okay, and so they have that in their favor, but also, as was mentioned, the biggest thing, as I mentioned earlier, and you already know what it is. You already know what it is. And that's the support of the families in the communities. Requires agencies to post online a list of entities that receive federal funding, financial assistance for the provision of social service programs. Clarifies the principle that organizations engaging in explicitly religious activities must perform these activities outside of and separately in time and locations from programs supported with federal financial assistance, and that participation in explicit religious activities must be voluntary. Listen to that. The executive order creates an interagency working group of federal agencies co-chaired by the Office of Management and Budget. Now, I want to say this before I end. When was it? I believe it was 2010. Over $2.1 billion. Listen to this, y'all. Over $2 billion. $2.1 billion were funded to faith-based initiative programs. So where did all that money go? Where did all that money go? Now, you might have some smaller churches who, during the COVID, may not have met the criteria to get money. But maybe some of y'all was in the church shouting when they told you they got the money. But did you get any of it? Did you get any of it? Yeah, you was probably jumping up and down when they said, yeah, we got the money from the government. You know, but did you get any of it? How much of that went to doing programs in the community? Over $2.1 billion went to faith-based initiative programs. Okay? I want that to stick with you for a moment. I want that to stick with you for a moment, because as I had just read explicitly to you in regards to how these monies are being divvied up. And we see these preachers living lavish. And I'm not suggesting that a preacher should live poor. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying be godly. You can't if you can live like that, and then see someone in your congregation who's not doing well and overlook that, you ain't been called by no God. Really. And people do this all the time. They overlook people as long as they're fine. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to, I think we're going to stop there for tonight. And we're going to, we're going to stop there. We're going to stop there. And there are so many, I'll say this, and I'm going to be ending up really in a moment. There are so many, because what you have to understand, there are so many people, religious organizations, who are in line to receive this money. You could be a mosque, you could be a synagogue, you could be a church, because all of these entities come under a 501c3. So they are built, as I just read to you, and as I just mentioned to you, that 2.1 billion, that's a lot of money, y'all, that went out to faith-based initiative religious entities back in 2010. And they're still getting money every year. They're getting money every year, or every quarter, or however it works. But again, I would be questioning what's being done with the money. If you don't see anything around you changing, what's that tell you? If you don't see that anything around you changing, if you don't see anything in your community changing, what is your hallelujah for? What is your thank you, Jesus, for? What is all that for? What's all that jumping around and running around and, like you, I see, and I don't want to go there. I really don't, but we need to wake up. They're playing on your emotions. Wake up, my people. But they talk a good game. It's a skill. They talk a good game. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to stop right there for now, and we're going to come back again, and we're going to pick up on this again. So again, remember to support, like. That's all you got to do is like. If you find it within your heart, because I want to bring you content that matters, something that you can actually think about, that's going to save your life, then of course, follow your heart. But you're not obligated. You're not obligated at all. So until next time, this is Seth Moore coming to you from Anchor by Spotify. Remember to visit us on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple Music, Podbean, and many, many other host sites. So until next time, kings and queens, be safe. Keep your vibration high. We'll see you soon. Okay, have a great night.